Today.
I'm good. Thank you.
Good. Okay, Dana. So now I have about 20 questions. And so we're going to try to step through this. I think the pace is one that will give you plenty of time to answer. So I'm not timing your answers. I want you to be comfortable with the amount of time that you've been given to answer the question, okay? But I would like to say, to the best that you can, get to answering the question, because at the end you will have a closing opportunity to add some if you need to. So with that said, I will have just a very few policy specific questions. Most of them are just to draw out from you what's important to you and what you want the grassroots to know about you and your candidacy for the RPT chair. So if you're ready, we'll begin.
I am.
Okay, all right. So thank you, Dr. Dana Myers, for being with us today and participating in our interview. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to identify the character qualities, the core beliefs and experience that makes you right for chairman of the Republican Party of Texas. So tell the delegates and alternates why you are the best choice.
I believe I'm the best choice because I have a proven track record of not only volunteer leadership and servant leadership when asked to do these tasks and actually roles, but also the statewide experience at this point to implement what we need to do to protect Texas. I started very active in leadership about 6 to 7 years ago, never thinking that I would do anything more than be involved and try to help my local area. And I think, as most people find out, when you are effective at what you do, people tend to give you more things to do. That said, I was asked not only to run for vice chairman 2 years ago by the grassroots and some donors. I was again asked this time over the Christmas holiday to really consider that, given my track record of success, but also really working with the grassroots, working the state, knowing the local people, and being a person of my word and integrity, as well as a woman of faith. And so I think those are skill sets and character traits that I have. I also know that I'm used to working in whatever circumstances professionally that I'm faced with to make the best of it and build a team that's going to be effective. So I want everyone to be successful. And I've never asked anyone to do anything that I wouldn't do myself.
Hey, thank you. Where can the job description of RPT chair be found? And then would you cite your understanding of a few of those official duties?
It is found in the SREC bylaws as well as election code. That is essentially to call the meetings of the SREC to determine and help with the elections. It is, I actually reviewed this earlier today. There are many things to fundraise for the party as well, and make sure that we represent the party in any lawsuits, and to make sure that we communicate and help organize with the SREC.
Okay, thank you. Where can you find the best indicator of what the Texas Republican Party base believes about key issues? And how do you believe the RPT can best demonstrate to its voter base that they have been heard? And how can you lead that effort?
I think besides talking to the various organizations across the state and listening to the actual voters and grassroots during their meetings, which I've been doing now for almost 3.5 years specifically, I think it's very important also to get a sense of where our legislative priorities are. Those are determined by the convention goers and the delegates. The platform and the principles also determine what our goals are. And the things that we vote on during convention for our principle, or not our principles, but our platform and legislative priorities are the things that we'll advocate for I think that's probably the best representation of some of the grassroots collectively in one area. But when you travel the state, you will hear different opinions depending on their region, because certain regions have different things that are important to them. And there was a second part of that. I'm sorry, I missed the question.
How can the RPT best demonstrate to its voter base that they've been heard, and how would you lead the effort?
I think part of what that will go into, especially when we're discussing at the SREC, but also planning for legislative session, is making sure that we have fully functional committees that are developed to promote the things that the grassroots want in legislative session. So I think that is working groups, being prepared to go testify, help the grassroots know how to testify and get them involved in the process so that they also can have their voices heard and amplify the voices of the party at the Capitol. It was very well done this year in many of the subgroups, and I think that is something that we can replicate. And our success in passing legislation and working with our legislators where possible is also another avenue to further our success.
Okay, thank you. So as a little follow-up to that, what about the Republican primary ballot propositions? Do you think that what the base said about each of those 13 propositions, do you believe that that should inform the direction of the Republican Party of Texas as well? And how so?
Yes, in fact, during the discussion, the SREC meeting, when those ballot propositions were being discussed and then voted on, that is something that I think reflects anything that wasn't accomplished in legislative session or has become very apparent that we need to work on. For example, I was behind ballot proposition 12, which is to make sure that all our voters are citizens, registered to vote, or citizens. And that was one of the highest achieving ballot propositions. And that's, of course, because as we've seen the world change with our open border in Texas, it's become very apparent that we have to shut those loopholes down that are there. So I think that's just one example of how we as a party can not only plan for the future, but also react to what may be going on as the world changes in Texas right now with the situation facing. I do think it's extremely important, and that will also be guiding our legislative efforts going forward.
Thank you. Current party rules allow for the SREC to censure a Republican office holder that violates the party's core principles. Do you believe we should have this rule, and why or why not?
I do believe in this rule. I think that we have an option that should the local counties in the representatives district prove that they have broken or violated our platform 3 different times with documentation, and that is reviewed by the local county in their districts. When that is brought forth, I think it's very incumbent upon the SREC and leadership to review that and see if it rises to the occasion of a censure. I know we passed 3 different censures this past cycle that were very seriously debated, considered, and had proof behind them. I don't think it's something that we should use without very thoughtful consideration, though, because there are other things then that we are obligated to do as a party as far as spending to inform the voters. Not that that's a bad thing. We just have to make sure that we have the money to do that if we're going to vote that way.
Thank you. What are some examples of the actions that you believe represent a clear violation of the party's core principles? So you can either cite past examples, or if you want to be more generic about that, just say if you had a censure in front of you, what do you think would be a supreme violation?
For example, one of the things on one of the people that was censured this past was when they killed the bill to make sure that we had only citizens voting in Texas. That seems like something that when we're trying to maintain our sovereignty and our integrity of our vote, that's a violation. Supporting Democrats would be another example that's pretty significant, either monetarily or by deed. That would be, I think, censurable. we've had problems with people not doing what they say they're going to do in violation of our principles and platform. And so when that happens, I think those are the things that the local counties can bring forth.
Okay, thank you. Should you be elected, what tangible metrics should Republicans use to determine if you have been successful?
Me personally, as the chair, I think there's some various metrics. One, the functionality of the party. I think first, probably most obvious for the chairman, is you do have to have a fundraising base in order to fulfill the functions and duties of the party, such as getting out the vote, making sure that we register voters, and that we have our messaging and resources for the county chairs and the precinct chairs, as well as our staff, and having so staff to staff a state as large as Texas. That's one. The other is the successful legislation that we just discussed. That is one thing. And the other two is how successful are we at getting out the vote for Texas? Our numbers continue to dwindle. And as we have a changing demographic in Texas, as well as the growth in Texas, that's concerning because our partisan index for Texas is only 56%, meaning we're about 6% ahead of the Democrats. So I think we need to do a much better job as far as getting out the vote and getting people to the polls. An average of 43% turnout in the state is not good enough to make sure that we maintain our majorities. And I'd like to see those higher because then it deters the Democrats from putting more money into Texas.
Thank you. If you're elected as the RPT chair, what percentage of the party's yearly budget would you like to see in donations of $100 or less? And what would the RPT need to do to increase these low dollar donations from the grassroots?
I would actually like to see at least 50%, but that would mean that we would be bringing in a lot new voters and a lot more voters that are registered, but also more local small dollar donors. I've heard from conversations again across the state from different regions, people are wanting to come back to the party, but they also want to see more value for their dollar. They would like to have phones that are answered consistently. They would like to have training programs in their area that the party can help either co-sponsor or run. They'd like to have more information on election integrity. There's a lot of things that the everyday citizen's concerned about, and they would like to see the party help their county chair, especially in some of the smaller areas where they don't have the resources. I think we can bring a lot of people back that way, and also doing local events so that they can feel more connected to the party in their regions. I think that's another way to do that.
Thank you. There is a perception that party officials must place value on opinions of high dollar donors over the identified priorities of the Republican primary voters and those of the convention delegates who serve to represent the interests back home. Do you believe that this is an accurate perception, and why or why not?
I know that that's a question that comes up every year, especially when any large donors approach the party. I think the first thing you have to ask as a chairman are there strings attached to this money? If there are strings attached, then you have to decide whether or not you're going to take it. I personally don't believe that we should take money with strings attached. I think that if someone wants to donate to the party, I would like to rather redirect their focus on, if you're interested, for example, in outreach, this is where this money is going to be allotted to. If you're interested in election integrity, we'd like to see it in this pot. I think there are ways to reach the various donors across the Republican spectrum, raise money, not betray our values and our principles, which I'm not willing to do, and make sure that we get the party funded. And again, I think open lines of communication built on trust, the integrity of your word, that you're going to do what you say you're going to do with the money. I think that people will respect that, even if they don't completely agree with where we're standing at the moment on the conservative
Thank
spectrum.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you support legalizing casino or online gambling in Texas? Why or why not?
That'd be a no to both.
Okay. Would you like to say why?
I think that both of those are not necessarily upholding our principles and our morals of the party. And I do believe that those bring in other elements potentially of organized crime. As far as the gambling is concerned, that seems to always be the case, whether you have the best plan or not. And certainly with cartel influence in Texas now reaching all our major cities and areas, I think that's certainly a concern. I would not want to see them get any more foothold in Texas than they already have. And as far as the second one was legalizing marijuana, is that the question?
No, I haven't asked you that question.
Okay.
I asked about casino or online gambling,
Oh,
what your position was and why or why not. I just wanted you to give the sort of the principles or what your mindset was that informed that response of no.
correct. I'm sorry, I was expecting those together. But no, the same apply to whether it's online or in-person gambling. I think that we have enough opportunities right now to try to walk a straight path and be upstanding citizens. I think that some people may succumb to gambling that they don't really know that how to stop themselves from spending money or addictions and various things. So I don't think that we need to provide people more opportunity to stray.
Thank you. Have you ever testified at a legislative hearing? When did you do so? Approximately how often and on what topics?
I testified specifically on getting us out of ERIC, which was at 1070. That was my major bill that I worked on. I did testify for that. I can't remember the date. That was probably in the first session, but I remember it took multiple attempts and multiple attendances at meetings with our House representatives to make sure that that was passed well into the last minute of the first session. I did have multiple meetings in the offices and working groups on border security, as well as banning vaccine mandate. But as far as me registering to testify specifically, that was on ERIC.
Thank you. Do you support legalizing and decriminalizing marijuana in the state of Texas? Why or why not?
Yeah, see, I was already anticipating that question with the gambling because that's probably going hand in hand. I do not support legalizing marijuana. The issue with that, not only as a former physician, a retired physician, and knowing some of the medical effects of that brain changes, it's also now apparent with our drug problems coming through the border, as well as the drugs that are being supplied, especially to our children. Many of the marijuana products have heightened levels of THC because of the way they're grown genetically, as well as laced with fentanyl. So I absolutely do not think that that's appropriate. And I also think it's a gateway drug.
Thank you. Do you believe that the RPT has done and is doing enough now on election integrity and ballot security? And explain your answer.
No, I don't, unfortunately. And that is one of the main reasons that I was asked to consider running for this, as well as my own decision to do that. It became apparent end of November, beginning of December, that the party was choosing a different path on election integrity and really delegating that to the RNC, who had not yet come into Texas. My feeling is for us to advocate and get past all this other platform priorities, legislative things that we want done, we have to make sure that our elections are secure. We don't have enough transparency in our elections. I don't think that the function of how these elections are run a lot of times are without issue. Just in the recent past month or two, I've been on the phone with a lot of grassroots activists during recounts in various parts of the state. Dallas Tarrant just got that report the other day, as well as problems with logic and accuracy testing in Collin, and then hearing about the Smith County recount as well. And thankfully, that one actually seemed fairly straightforward, but the Dallas recount was certainly a mess. And the fact that we didn't even know as a party really how to instruct people on what they needed to do, everything from the grassroots to the candidates, I think is something we need to address. But as far as election integrity is concerned, no, we are way behind the game right now currently in our election integrity efforts, as training election workers and poll watchers. Last major election, we had 8,000 trained poll watchers. Right now, we're at about 1,500, and I'm not even sure all of them have been trained. And those were recently added by the RNC person, not some of the grassroots efforts that we've had. Those are probably 500 or so additional as well as some of the other grassroots groups that may be doing it currently. But for the size of Texas and how important Texas is going forward for the presidency, we absolutely have to do a lot more. And that is actually one of the things that, given the fact that we will have 5 months after the convention to be prepared for the November election, is probably the #1 priority for me, in addition to jointly fundraising to make sure that we can pay for what we need to pay for, get out the vote, do targeted messaging, but also make sure that everyone is well equipped and well trained for the November election.
Thank you. The next question has to do with both conflict resolution and personal conflict resolution. So if you think about a fork in the road experience in your life, one that maybe was painful or one that had a long-lasting impact, what shaped your decision-making and actions? Tell us how Dr. Dana Myers handles very stressful, possibly life-changing situations.
Well, that depends. If I'm actually the surgeon, which is also kind of that mentality that I try to approach a lot of things for, and I remind the younger people that have worked for me, when they think the world is ending, I said, first of all, is someone dying in front of you? If they're not, it's okay. I think you have to approach things with that perspective and also know that basically God's in control. And I don't say that lightly. I think you have to treat people as the way you want to be treated, and be respectful even if you disagree. And I'm a big believer in the Matthew principle, to try to have those conversations when you disagree in private, and try to resolve the issue there. And if not, then again, you may have to be a little more public about how you go about things to affect change. However, I do really go back to trying to find the best in everyone, to build the team, to get the job done. I have operated over the years with many people that I didn't necessarily think were nice people, but I also knew that they were the best person for that particular job or that particular portion of the operation that we needed to get done to save someone's life. So I think that's how I approach things. And I know right now that what we're facing as a state and a country is so much bigger than any one person's personal ego, that we have to make sure that we have mission over our personal issues. But that way is a nice way of putting it.
Thank you. And that actually segues very nicely with the next question. So reflect on the state of our nation and our state of Texas. As you said, grave issues facing us. Cite what you believe are the 2 biggest challenges for the Republican Party of Texas, and how would you lead on these issues?
Well, I think right now what we're finding when you talk to people, both especially statewide, and also I think people are feeling this nationally from what I hear from friends in different states, is that there is a sense of hopelessness, despair, and people are not sure what to do. I'm hearing that a lot from Texas, which is why also I think when there is a void of leadership or hope, people are leaving the party. And that is, I think, part of one of the issues that we face as Texas right now, is we have 40% independence that we're dealing with. And that's somewhat perhaps the state of the party, but it's also the state of people moving into the state of Texas. I think one of our biggest hurdles is to make sure that we articulate what's at stake, not only for the state, but why Texas is the key to the country going forward. A lot of things that we're facing that Texas is perhaps magnifying to the rest of the country is our open border. That is an invasion. It is bringing along a plethora of problems, not only for our children, our schools, our healthcare system, financial strains for the state. It's also affecting the rest of the country. But I do think that part of that is educating people about what's at stake, how they can get involved, why it's not hopeless, and give them something, an action plan that they can actually personally get involved in and participate in, not only saving their state, but also protecting the country. And I think that those, again, go back to leadership, setting goals, making sure that you're very transparent, and bringing people on board to work with you, not just as someone who's considered a worker bee or something like that. I think people have to be invested in what they're working in.
Thank you. So what is a character quality that you value most in your relationships?
Integrity.
Okay. Would you define what integrity means to you?
Integrity to me means that you are a person of your word, and that your word matches your actions, your thoughts, your deeds, and also combines an element of faith, so that you're trying to be a moral and just person. That is to me what integrity means.
Okay, thank you. Would you describe to the delegates and alternates for the convention what your leadership style looks like? How do you go about influencing people and persuading them to do the right thing?
I think the first thing is, I've told a lot of people, is you have to lead by example. I think the way you carry yourself, the way you interact with people, try to be well informed as best you can in all subject matters, which is impossible, but again, trying to be prepared, share that information with people, and also be welcoming to people. I have found that by building local relationships across the state and with various grassroots leaders and organizations and building the trust, people know that when you say something, you mean it, and that you're going to carry through on it. And I think that's the first thing that we do, is rebuilding the trust. And when that happens, people will want to naturally follow and join you, because they see that you're in the field or in the trenches doing the work, and you're not asking them to do anything that you wouldn't personally do. You just want them to come alongside you and help. And I've always said I want to work shoulder to shoulder with people. I'm not there to be a far aloof general. I've always been known, I'll clean the bathrooms in the office if I have to. I will make sure at the same time that people are comfortable and have something to drink while they're there for a long meeting. I think part of that is people want to participate in groups where they feel welcome and that they're treated respectfully and with kindness.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on extending opportunities for booth space at the Republican State Convention to groups whose stated mission violates the Republican Party of Texas platform?
I think you asked me that 2 years ago when I was interviewing for vice chair, and I think that is a no. I know it's a no. If they violate our principles on our platform, unfortunately, they will be turned down.
Okay. Thank you. When you consider the advances of cultural Marxism over the last several decades, and that went largely unnoticed by lots of people until we had the period of COVID. And since then, I think the awareness has been raised on the issue of cultural Marxism and the impact that it has on children. What are your thoughts on how we, as conservative Republicans, how we as Texans what can we do to protect children in the next generation?
I think one of the most positive things, which is ironic, that came out of COVID was the fact that more and more parents were paying attention to what their kids were learning online and in the quote schools that were sort of allowed. I think that not only do we recruit the parents to start getting more active, politically active in their schools and their local communities, I think they're already there. I think that will be one big group that will be active this election and going forward. And I don't think they're going to put that genie back in the bottle. Cleaning up the school curriculum, the school books, the dirty books, all those things that the party was very successful on trying to advocate and got passed in legislation. I know there's a legal challenge on one of those, but I think continuing to make sure that there are alternatives for faith-based education, moral guidance, all those kinds of things will be very important. And I think the involvement of parents, like I said, I don't think that's going to go away. I think that we now have alternatives being discussed at the state level in Texas for school choice, more homeschooling options, more small group study. Families are creating study pods and school pods, various names I've heard them called, where they can make sure that their children are raised in their values and consistent with what they believe. And I think that we're going to see a whole shift in the way that that occurs. But I do think from a legal standpoint, we do have to make sure that we provide a legal framework for children from predators and anyone who may abuse their access to children, which we're seeing a lot of right now in the various school board issues that are coming forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now it's time for you to close the deal, and you have plenty of time left in this scheduled appointment to do that. So you speak on the issues that are important to you, and it's all up to you. Dr. Dana Myers, thank you for being with us today.
And thank you so much for the opportunity. As far as my plan and my experience, we've talked about my experience. This is not something I do lightly. I do this because I believe in the mission for Texas and protecting our families and protecting our state. I do think that the Texas 40 electoral votes that we continue to talk about everywhere in the state are the key to having a Republican presidency for the future. And I know that none of us right now can possibly imagine another 4 years of the destruction of the Biden administration. I don't believe that we'll survive that. And I think many people are waking up to that point and wanting to get involved. With that said, a new chairman will have 5 months between the end of convention and the start of early voting. And I think that my experience and the work that I've done, not only at the local level and engagement for Harris County when I was co-chair of that, bringing in various ethnic groups and demographics, as well as then moving to the vice chair of Harris County, which is our largest county. And I know we have issues, but we did build a very strong infrastructure that we can replicate in various parts. We can make sure that we get out the vote, do voter registration, and help the smaller rural counties, which are a protective wall. And then, of course, this last 2 years of traveling as vice chairman, I see where we need help in the state. I'm very well versed. It's good and bad about what we can build and what we need to build very quickly. And I know that people are very receptive to that. They are dying for training. They are looking for leaders who can provide election integrity training, election worker training, poll watchers, civics, essentially, like what is it to be a citizen and what are your duties? How do you get involved in the party? What does a precinct chair do? How do they do those jobs? Being a county chair that's effective and making sure that the party helps them find the technology and the tools they need to do their job effectively and very efficiently, because none of us have enough time in this world to do all of this. So I think that that's very important. Not only are we going to have a 5-month window there, which is going to be a very hard and tight sprint to build a very effective and trained army, my plan right now is a 30-day emergency, raise a significant amount of funds that we can fund all these activities, as well as regional trainers. And then also, of course, have that 5-month plan and then merge it into a 2-year strategic plan once we get through the election. And we plan on being successful with that. In the interim, right now, anticipating what might need to happen very quickly, I have built a team of fundraisers from across the spectrum of Republican representation of the party, everything from the ultra conservatives to the more moderates. And we even have state as well as a national fundraiser ready to go. Just got done talking to that woman in the airport the other day, actually, flights. So I'm very excited to have at least 4 or 5 currently, and I'd like to build it more. Very professional, successful fundraisers that can help us raise the money for the party and reach all parts of the Republican Party, because I think it's going to take all of us to right this ship very quickly. The other thing that I have learned is how to be an effective advocate in the legislative session. We worked very hard to get that ERIC bill passed, as well as many SREC who also advocated for very important bills. And knowing that, I think that is something that I know there are many grassroots organizations training that. We need to have organizational leadership from these grassroots actually at a round table so that we can exchange ideas and see where we're overlapping so that we don't waste our time and money. I think there's a lot of things that we can cooperate on. And if election integrity is your thing, let's put all those leaders and organizations together and have them move forward. in the ways that they can coordinate. If school books and children are the issue, that's another group. There are many things that we can do more efficiently, more effectively, and save everyone time, and yet have a large army of grassroots volunteers and activists show up when they need to. I think that was one thing that we saw that was very effective during legislative session, getting a lot. The other thing that I have found is that over the past almost 2 years now, developing relationship with the national Republican foundations, especially on election integrity, everything from America First Policy Institute, Center for Renewing America, Thomas More Society, Tea Party Patriots, AMAC, list goes on. I think there are 25 organizations now nationally on those calls, and I've developed personal relationships with those people, and they are willing to put their resources behind Texas as well. Everyone understands that Texas is much more in play than we discuss, and that is my concern. I want to make sure that we're prepared, that we're well equipped, and that we're ready to go very quickly. And I also think I have the temperament to reach across perhaps some of the broken relationships and the divides that have been created by various issues in the party. I really do feel that I am about mission and not ego, and that is my first priority, is making sure that we protect Texas and Texans.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dana Myers. Thank you for being with us today, and good job.
Thank you, ma'am.
Robert, hello.